Ah yes, the Crimson Behelit, a very rare and unique item that has found its way into your hands. Now when the time is right, this Behelit will awaken and open a gate between worlds, a passage that will guide you all the way to the subscribe button for the New World Review, and pressing it will ensure more Berserk related content uploaded straight into your YouTube feeds. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today I'm going to take this opportunity to discuss a series that I see a request for in my comment section at least once per video, being Berserk. And very specifically why you, yes you, need to read Berserk. And if you've already read Berserk, then this is your biannual reminder to read it again, because why not? What else have you got to do? So despite the fact that I have not covered it on this channel before, primarily because I wasn't sure how much interest there would be on Berserk related content, this series is one that has really stuck with me throughout the years, and only seems to provide more and more value with each subsequent rereading of it. And if you're a non-Berserk fan watching this and wondering why I'm focusing so much on reading the manga rather than say watching the anime or even the movies, then stay tuned because yeah, we will certainly cover that. And I'd also like to add a caveat to this discussion, which is unlike most things I cover on this channel, I do not think that Berserk holds an innate universal appeal. You need to be very willing to open yourself up to it, and in many cases even challenge yourself with the material presented. However, the reward for doing so is immeasurable, so let's begin this exploration with quite probably the most common factor of praise brought up in regards to Berserk, which is its art. Now honestly, I feel quite stereotypical and just a little bit boring stating that, mate, you need to read Berserk because art, and that's because I'm sure many of you have had this exact experience where you're speaking to a Berserk fan and the topic of art comes up, and instead of them actually telling you what is so good about it, they just visibly jizz in their pants and promptly excuse themselves to clean it up. However, when this manga features quite possibly objectively the finest art in the entire medium, it's pretty hard to avoid acknowledging this point immediately. Kentaro Miura has an absurd mastery of conveying atmosphere in a two-dimensional format, with the most effective use of lighting that I think I've ever seen in comics in general, which is so ridiculously important in providing depth into this world he has crafted, because through his godlike control of lighting on a page, he has the power to plunge us into the deepest depths of hell, but at the same time, Miura can also portray some of the most profound angelic majesty, as well as everything in between. Berserk is an extremely tangible experience at all times, and it really allows the reader to become completely immersed in its art, and of course it's not all about light either, but also any number of deeply tangible features like texture, for example. When Miura wants to convey something as particularly rough, like say almost anytime guts is on a page, then he will do so with intricately flowing and jagged lines to provide this very coarse appearance. However, on the flip side, he can also craft existences that feel genuinely supernaturally smooth, even if you're just taking it in with your eyes. And once again, Miura can also produce everything in between, which means that every character, every landscape, every object in Berserk is given its own individually crafted texture to have it stand out in this world. And in this art section, I also want to potentially dispel a concern that many people are going to have going into Berserk, which is in terms of its content, and specifically in terms of it being too dark. So yes, Berserk's art will, as I said, plunge you into the deepest depths of hell, but that is not Miura's sole focus, and he juxtaposes that content quite brilliantly with opposing forces of pure ornate beauty. And there's also moments very simplistic and flat art for the sake of comedy, so there is so much more for the eyes to feast on in Berserk than just hellish demons, and every subsequent page you take in will reward you with a new experience. And the greatest thing about Berserk is that Miura is a world-class artist from the get-go. His style does evolve and refine over time, as with all mangaka, but the difference in quality between chapter 1 of Berserk and chapter 359 is like comparing a diamond to an even bigger diamond. They're both pretty damn breathtaking. It's not like when you go back 2 decades and look at say the very first chapter of One Piece and go, oh wow, we've certainly come a long way since those days. And I think Miura's artistic consistency really assists in creating a cohesive experience over the lifespan of Berserk. Alright, that's enough about art though, because that might be enough to appeal to aesthetic demons like myself, but the next reason you should absolutely read Berserk is for its glorious and well-explored characters. Another nice vague statement that you probably hear in regards to a lot of series, but let me make it very clear just how far and above Berserk sits from characters in the large majority of other manga series. Just as with its tangible art style, characters in Berserk are granted exceptional depth and are scattered all the way across every ideological spectrum imaginable. The large majority of residents in Berserk carry with them a sense of great evil, great good, and even a hint of, wow, that's pretty effed up, with one of the greatest examples of this being Farnace de Vendimian. And don't at me with the pronunciation of this, it definitely isn't Farnese. And yes, I do know that my Italian sucks, but that's just how things are going to be. In any case, Farnace is about as complex of a character as one could possibly be, managing to embody one of the more incredible sources of kindness in the series, but at the same time also being a person capable of masturbating to the thought of burning heretics at the stake. So how the hell does that work out? Well, read and find out. She's a very tricky character though, and no singular experience of Farnace in any chapter could possibly give you the full sense of who she is, which is very, very common in Berserk. Characters need a lot of time to unfold, and you often won't get a full sense of them until the completion of a rather lengthy arc. But that is incredibly compelling, because each and every one of them presents a mystery where you're never quite sure what twist is going to come next. And this isn't to say that Berserk is a completely morally grey series either, where there is like no true good or evil. There are most certainly both of those, but they are explored on a very hyper scale, such as with the primary antagonist of the series, Godhand. Despite being the epitome of evil, these guys are never flat or boring, and their presence within this world is both genuinely intriguing and profoundly terrifying, particularly in the case of a certain femto. Plus, Berserk has a lot of small victories with its characters, such as being one of the super rare series in the world to have created a mainstay child character who is not the most annoying existence on the planet. He actually turns out to be something of a masterclass of how to effectively incorporate a child into really any story. And of course, I haven't even touched on the heart and soul of Berserk being Guts and Casca. But really, the less said about them out of context, the better. Let's just say they are perfectly capable of helming a story like Berserk, which, speaking of, the number 3 reason why you need to read Berserk is simply because of the story and its ever-evolving nature. Something which you probably won't get from an outside experience of Berserk is that it certainly does not stay one note. It starts out as something of a demon hunter revenge-seeking piece, but over the course of a handful of arcs, Berserk transforms into something truly unrecognizable from what it was when it began, which is certainly not a bad thing. In fact, I personally really enjoy that Berserk has engaged in a very fluid evolution of story, and like most series, yeah, there's a primary goal here and there, but for the most part, the reader, just like the characters, end up being swept away in this grand fantasy, and a lot of time the story focuses on characters adjusting to the radically changing world around them. So it has this lovely natural progression about it. Now, opposed to characters and art, I would say that the story is far from perfect, and I think that it does have its own golden age, which ironically is not the golden age arc. Conviction arc is peak Berserk, IMO, but the greater story itself always manages to remain supremely intriguing, and its various explosive climaxes will leave you appropriately stunned and amazed. Which is going to lead into delightful reason number 4 to pick up Berserk, which is an incredible depth of world. Art, story, and characters are absolutely nothing in my eyes without an exceptional stage and set design to play upon. And Berserk certainly answers that call by providing a rich landscape with no lack of political, historical, and mystical intrigue. In fact, at times it really does give you the feeling that you have stepped into a part of history, because every location in this world appears to have a lengthy past that has informed every decision that is being made to this day. And it really helps the world feel so much more natural and continues that idea of characters being swept up in something far greater than themselves. But Berserk goes a lot further than that and fleshes out alternate planes of existence and how they interact with the standard mortal realm as we know it, with pretty unbelievable detail as well. Although it does strike a fine balance and doesn't reveal too much, leaving some great layers of mystery for us to ponder. And you know, a very fascinating example of this would be what is known as the Lost Chapter of Berserk, which Miura omitted from Berserk's volume release and thus the canon because it gave just a little bit too much away about the overall depth of the world, which shows that Miura has a keen sense of maintaining mystery and allowing continued versatility with writing. But in general, Berserk really does present its readers with a Tolkien-like landscape, where the more you delve into it, the more you realize how truly rich it is. Now, as for reason number 5, we have the exploration of ideas, ever so many ideas, most of which we can very plainly personally identify with, such as betrayal, corruption, loneliness, anger, darkness, despair, all of that human goodness that the reader can feel on a very visceral level. But the ideas of Berserk also break out into the more philosophically complex, and in particular, I quite like how the series decides to tackle the overall issue of religion. I think it's an incredibly honest take on what causes religion to commence, thrive, and even fall, as well as challenging the concept of faith in general. And if you're religious, then maybe that doesn't sound so great to you, but faith itself is an idea that is up for grabs in Berserk. When should you have faith? What should you have faith in? And so in the end, I don't think Berserk condemns religion as much as it makes commentary on religious institutions, if that makes sense. But that is one very mere aspect of Berserk, because it does the same with political power, warfare, and a lot of broad societal issues, and it even goes a step further to tackle one of the greatest questions of humanity, which is the very concept of good and evil and what can be considered what. And then, even if it is classified, could it even be that simple? And Miura does this by way of various means. One of my favorites is purely aesthetic. So a lot of times in Berserk, you will run into a case where something angelically beautiful ends up being one of the greatest sources of darkness. Meanwhile, something ugly and broken represents the greatest reservoir of hope in the world. There's an awful lot to play with in Berserk, including the idea that everything is just subject to the law of causality, and essentially Basically everything we do is by and large meaningless with a predetermined outcome. Or is it? I don't know. It's kind of up to you and the characters to decide that for yourselves. Now, as for reason number 6 as to why one needs to read Berserk specifically, it's because there honestly just is not a competent anime incarnation of it. So even if you're not a Berserk fan, most anime enthusiasts have probably heard about the debacle that is the 2016 incarnation of the series. Famous for its uncanny valley character models and animation, but also for chopping out some really key stuff from the manga, and all around just presenting a very watered down product that will never come anywhere near close to giving you the highest highs or the lowest lows from the manga experience. And I can't say it gets much better in other incarnations either. The 1997 anime is aged, to say the least. I'd say withered beyond belief, and it also cuts very integral characters and story elements. I think the best chance one would probably have is with the 3 films that adapt the Golden Age events. But even then, there are some choices made in these that just don't make it an ideal Berserk experience, in my opinion. So there is currently no substitute for the manga. Nothing else can provide you that raw shot of Berserk straight into your veins, and if you're not after that sort of experience, then I understand Berserk is not for everyone. But if you are going to do it, then I cannot comprehend why you would want to experience it as anything less than it should be. Let Miura drag you to hell, take a tour of heaven, and struggle on earth. Which paves the way for my final reason to read Berserk, which is simply to challenge yourself. Berserk is not a kind series that will hold your hand and guide you through a story. It thrusts you into an established world and tells you to survive on your own. It will confront you with unimaginable horrors, grotesque violence, much of which includes a high degree of sexual violence as well, by the way, but it will also present you with all that is good in the world. You know, love, friendship, mateship, honor, belief, and everything else on that side of the spectrum. But what Berserk does not do is mask either of these. It will give you the absolute darkness as well as the piercing light. And as a reader, it is your job to explore all of that and make up your own mind about some of the tougher questions of the world. Because as much as this is a dark fantasy piece, it very much reflects the common existence of real-world human society. And when our world can be so easily compared with sickening demonic presences, then that can be uncomfortable. But at the very least, it does allow the reader to think for themselves and come to their own conclusions. And it is for these 7 and really many more reasons that, if you are so inclined, I would strongly recommend that you read Berserk. But what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more Berserk style content, then please do let me know by subscribing to the channel as a result of this video, because I would love to make more if there is a keen interest for it. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.